This story is not meant to be heard after midnight.
The car rolled to a stop before the old estate, a sprawling manor wrapped in ivy and silence. Marina Vale, a folklore researcher, shut the engine off and stepped into the chill air. Her boots sank into damp soil, the faint scent of burnt wax lingering around the property. The house had been abandoned since the 1940s after the Candle murders, a case that never found its culprit. Marina wasn't here for thrill or fame. She'd been drawn by a letter, unsigned, that arrived a week ago. Return the candles to the altar before the moon wanes. Only then will the whispering stop. Inside, her flashlight illuminated flaking wallpaper, cobwebs thick as curtains, and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her every step. At the far end of the hall, a narrow staircase led down into the cellar. The air grew colder with each step, and soon the beam of her light fell upon a stone altar, 3 indentations forming a triangle. On the wall, faint words scratched in Latin read, Tres candeli una anima. 3 candles, 1 soul. Marina pulled the small box from her satchel. Inside lay 3 wax candles, crimson, white, and black. They had been recovered from victims' homes decades ago, each linked to a ritual murder. Yet something about them pulsed faintly in the dark, like veins beneath skin. Thunder cracked. The cellar door slammed shut above her, and in the brief silence that followed, she heard a whisper, "You shouldn't have come here, Marina." Marina froze, every nerve screaming. The whisper had been unmistakably close, right beside her ear. Her flashlight trembled, beam darting over stone walls. "Hello," she called out, though she already knew no one would answer. The cellar air seemed to breathe around her, as if the house itself was alive. She noticed faint trails of melted wax on the floor, leading toward a half-rotted door. When she opened it, she found a small ritual chamber, its walls etched with symbols drawn in blood and soot. Candles, now nothing but stubs, had been arranged in 3s. Marina felt a pulse behind her eyes, a sudden headache that came with another whisper, "Light them again, and see." Her trembling hands removed the red candle from the box. She placed it in the first indentation of the stone altar. The moment she struck the match, the flame burned dark crimson, casting impossible shadows. They danced in unnatural rhythm, as if mimicking her heartbeat. And then she saw them. For a fleeting second, reflected in the glossy wax, 3 figures stood behind her, faceless, wrapped in cloth, heads tilted. She turned sharply, light slicing through emptiness. Nothing there, but the whisper returned, clearer now. 1 for blood, 1 for bone, 1 for the soul. Marina climbed from the cellar, clutching her satchel. The first candle still burned within its holder, yet the wax didn't melt. She walked down the portrait hall, eyes drawn to the figures in frames, men and women whose faces seemed too lifelike. As lightning flashed through the windows, she noticed something dreadful. Each portrait now had her own face, frozen in various states of fear. Heart pounding, she ran her hand over one canvas. The paint was wet. She stumbled backward as her reflection in the nearest frame blinked, independently of her. From the end of the corridor came a faint, rhythmic tapping. When she followed it, she found a mirror, tall and cracked, leaning against the wall. Something moved inside it, not her reflection, but a shadow version of herself holding all 3 candles, already lit. The mirrored Marina smiled slowly, whispering, "You're late." The mirror shattered outward. Marina descended again, terrified yet drawn deeper. The cellar seemed larger than before, shifting like a living maze. On the altar, the red candles still burned. She placed the black candle next to it, struck another match, and the flame ignited with a void-colored light, more absence than glow. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, countless voices speaking from unseen mouths. She began hearing fragments of her own thoughts among them, twisted and reversed. She lights, she offers, she becomes. Suddenly, black smoke coiled from the candle and formed a shadow figure crawling along the ceiling. Its head turned unnaturally, facing her with glowing white eyes. Marina's body froze, not from fear, but because her limbs no longer obeyed her. The shadow's movements mirrored hers, controlling her every gesture. Her mouth opened against her will. "One more," it hissed through her, and the gate opens. She dropped the match. The flame flared violently, then extinguished, leaving her in suffocating dark. Marina could barely think. Her pulse was no longer her own. She fumbled for the white candle, her breath ragged. Something inside her whispered that she shouldn't light it, that the ritual was never meant for the living. But her hands moved anyway. The white candle touched the altar, and all 3 indentations began to glow with runes. The air thickened, vibrating with unseen energy. Every object in the room began to tremble. The shadows on the wall elongated into human shapes, screaming without mouths. Then the 3 flames twisted together, forming a column of light that split open, revealing an endless corridor of darkness beyond the stone wall. Marina staggered backward as unseen hands reached through the gap, pale and clawed. One of them brushed her cheek, cold as ice, yet burning to the bone. She screamed, voice swallowed by the howling void. "Now we remember you," the voices said in unison, and the light went out. The moment the 3rd candle ignited, the room seemed to sink deeper into darkness. The tiny flame flickered wildly, as if gasping for air. Marina's trembling fingers gripped the edge of the table. The ancient symbols carved into the wood pulsed faintly, glowing red. A heavy silence filled the space, the kind that carried a hum beneath it, like a whisper buried in static. Then a low moan slithered through the air. It didn't sound human. Behind her, the mirror began to fog up again, though the room was cold. Shapes formed within it, silhouettes twisting, crawling, merging. Marina tried to steady her breath, but when she blinked, one of those shapes seemed to turn and face her directly. Its head tilted slowly, like a predator noticing movement. The air thickened. Her chest felt tight. She took a step back, clutching the candle. "Who's there?" she whispered. No answer. Only the flicker of the flame reacting violently, as if something invisible exhaled beside her ear. Then she heard it, a faint voice, a child's. "Marina, blow it out." Her eyes widened. The voice was soft, almost pleading, but she knew no one was there. The door was locked. "Blow it out before it's too late," the voice repeated. Marina's hand hovered over the candle, but the flame moved, bending toward her fingers like it wanted to touch her. Then, in a single blink, it stretched upward, a column of light that hissed like a scream. The walls shook. The glass in the mirror cracked. From inside the reflection, a hand pressed against the surface, pale, wet, trembling. Marina stumbled back, tripping over a chair. The third candle exploded in a hiss of wax and smoke. The room went pitch black. Then she heard breathing, not hers, not close, right next to her ear. Marina froze. The darkness was total, pressing against her like a living thing. The only sound was the low hum of something electric, distant, like the echo of a power line after a storm. Her breath came out in quick, sharp bursts. "Who's there?" she whispered again. The air moved, a faint shuffling sound, followed by soft laughter. The voice of a child, the same one from before. "You shouldn't have lit them," it whispered. "Now he can see you." Marina turned toward the voice, but it shifted locations with every word. It seemed to come from inside the walls, from beneath the floorboards, from her own shadow. Her hand brushed against her phone on the table. She fumbled to unlock it, the screen's light cutting through the dark like a lifeline. The reflection in the cracked mirror showed her, wide-eyed, trembling, but behind her stood something much taller, barely visible, its face a smear of darkness. She spun around. Nothing, just the smell of burnt wax and metal. The floor creaked once, twice. Then, with agonizing slowness, the sound of bare feet walking toward her. She aimed her phone's light in that direction. The beam caught something glistening on the floor, 3 drops of thick, dark red liquid. Then a fourth, fresh, falling from above. She looked up. On the ceiling, the shadow hung upside down, its limbs long and jointed like broken branches, its head cocked at an impossible angle. The same voice, now deep and distorted, spoke again. "The ritual is done." Her phone flickered and died. The sound of something dropping to the floor echoed, a wet, heavy thud. Then came silence. Marina didn't scream. She couldn't, because she finally realized the breathing she'd been hearing wasn't next to her. It was coming from inside her own chest, like something else was inhaling through her lungs. Marina awoke to daylight. For a moment, she thought it had been a nightmare. The candles were gone. The room was clean. Her head throbbed with a dull ache. She stood up, dizzy, trying to recall the night before. Her phone lay shattered on the floor. The cracked mirror was now whole again. Had she fallen asleep? Hallucinated? Then she noticed something impossible. 3 dark fingerprints burned into the table, exactly where the candles had stood. Her stomach turned. She backed away, only to hear the faint sound of a door creaking open down the hallway. The air grew colder again. "Hello," she called out. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Coming closer. She grabbed a kitchen knife and stood frozen, watching the shadow stretch across the doorway. But when the figure appeared, she nearly dropped the knife. It was her father, pale, eyes hollow, wearing the same clothes he'd been buried in 2 years ago. "Marina," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "You shouldn't have called me." She couldn't breathe. "Dad." He stepped closer, his movements stuttering, like something else was puppeteering him from behind. His head twitched, and when he smiled, it wasn't his smile. "You opened the way." Her father's skin rippled. His mouth stretched too wide. The voice that came out wasn't human anymore. "He's coming for the last flame." She ran. Out the door, down the hall, stumbling over furniture. But every window she passed showed her own reflection. And in each one, her reflection wasn't running. It stood still, staring back, smiling. By the time she reached the front door, the sun had turned red. Marina stumbled outside, barefoot, the knife still trembling in her grip. The sky above was bathed in a deep crimson glow, the kind that doesn't belong to any dawn or dusk. Everything around her, the trees, the road, the air, felt drenched in the same sickly hue. Her neighborhood was silent, too silent. The birds were gone. The air smelled like iron and candle smoke. As she ran down the empty street, her reflection shimmered faintly in every window she passed, but each reflection showed her a few seconds behind, as though reality was lagging. "Wake up," she whispered to herself. "Wake up, wake up." Then a familiar voice echoed from the shadows of a nearby house. "You already did." She froze. The voice came from her reflection in the window, the reflection that now smiled while she didn't. The mirrored Marina raised her hand, and as she did, Marina's knife lifted from her own hand, moving as if controlled by invisible strings. Panic surged through her as the blade hovered near her throat. "Stop," she screamed. Her reflection tilted its head, eyes now black voids. The third flame never went out, it said, voice distorted and layered with whispers. "You're keeping it alive." Suddenly, the reflection shattered the glass from inside. Shards exploded outward, slicing Marina's arm. She stumbled backward, falling hard against the pavement as the shards melted into smoke, swirling into a tall, shadowed figure behind her. The same presence from the mirror. It loomed, face shifting like liquid shadow, dozens of hands crawling from its surface. From within its hollow chest, she saw the 3 candles, still burning. The voice inside her head was now a chorus. The ritual was never for summoning. It hissed. It was for binding. Marina screamed as one of the shadow's hands reached forward, sinking into her chest. She felt it grip her heartbeat, pull it taut like a string. Her vision dimmed. The red sky began to fade to black. The last thing she saw was her own reflection standing nearby, calm, unhurt, smiling faintly as the real Marina's body went still. When Marina opened her eyes again, she was back in her apartment. Everything was exactly as it had been before the ritual, except for one thing. Only one candle burned on the table. The others were gone. The mirror was spotless. The morning light streamed gently through the curtains. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. But as she stood, she noticed the faint trail of wax running down the wall, like the candle had been crying. She approached it slowly. Her reflection stared back, tired, pale, but her eyes looked slightly off, not quite aligned with her movements. She blinked. The reflection didn't. The phone on the counter buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. The screen flashed a message from an unknown number. "You left it burning." Her pulse spiked. She turned to the candle, its flame now burning blue. The air around her thickened, pressing against her skin like invisible fingers. The whispering started again, faint, overlapping voices. 3 flames, 3 doors, 1 soul must stay. Marina stumbled backward, shaking her head. "No, it's over." But the mirror rippled. The reflection stepped out. It looked exactly like her, but calmer, serene, as if relieved. "You shouldn't have called me," the double said softly. "But thank you. I'm free now." Marina tried to scream, but her throat seized. The reflection stepped closer, placing a hand on her chest. "You'll keep the flame this time." The candle flared, engulfing them both in blue fire. The apartment filled with the sound of whispering. Then silence. When the smoke cleared, only one figure remained standing. She looked at the mirror, now cracked again, and smiled faintly. The candle on the table flickered, then steadied. Outside, the sun dimmed, turning faintly red. Somewhere, far away, a voice whispered through the static of a forgotten radio frequency. "The ritual has begun again."
If you're still here, it means it found you too.